Hey everybody, welcome into a new episode of The Ring. Mark Childress here, Richmond Weaver. I will formally introduce Fred Cunningham here in just a second. But first things first, thank you to our sponsor, S.H. Carter. You can go in the show description right here and check and click on their web link. shcarterinc.com is the place to go. If you're working on a big project at your house, a construction project, don't make any decisions on it before you've reached out to our friends at S.H. Carter. Gravel, fill dirt, mulch, roll-off container rentals, dumpster rentals. You see their S.H. Carter dumpsters all over town. Go and check out my friends at S.H. Carter. Thank you guys so much for being sponsors of our show. As always, nationally syndicated radio host Richmond Weaver here with me. Good to see you, sir.
Fantastic to finally be back with you.
It's been like a month.
It has.
So I'm glad you could make some time for us.
Fortunately, I knew Fred was coming in.
There you go.
Like, all right, now I can be there.
I won't talk about the guests you skipped. We'll go off in a different direction. And Channel 7's very own Fred Cunningham. Fred, thanks for being here.
It's good to be here. I finally am able to squeeze this in through my bizarre sleeping patterns,
yes,
which is very odd when you work on a show that goes on at 4:30 in the morning is on till 9.
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about. I've been trying to get Fred on literally for 3 months, and whenever I'd reach out, we should do the show at 8 o'clock, and Fred was like an instant no, that's not happening.
Not happening.
And then when I got to 7, he debated one time. He's like, I might be able to make it, and then he turned me down. So you're on the air at 4:30. So talk to everybody about what your life is.
Okay, I will get the painful part out of the way early. My alarm goes off at 1:55 in the morning. I pause for the groans. That's when I get up on the first one. I've got the backup, so I've got the phone and I got the plug-in alarm. So I get up and breakfast, shower, on the road, and I get to the TV station right around 3:15. And I know. And then I actually produce a segment that takes me about 30 minutes that we run. It's kind of the viral video.
Yeah.
Or I'll squeeze in a couple sports things if they aren't already in the show. And I do that till about 3:45, and then I'm really kind of editing scripts after that. I write a few. Sometimes they ask me, hey, it's sports, can you write this? Sure.
Yeah.
And so we do that, then we go on the air at 4:30, and I'm still, when you're seeing another anchor on the air, or if you're seeing what we call a package, which means you're seeing a reporter's recorded thing, I'm on a laptop right there at the set, and I'm still kind of going through stuff just to kind of just go through it, just to maybe put in your own voice a little bit. And then from about 5:30 on, then we're good, and I'm on until 7. And now we do a show now where we kind of change a little bit. From 7 to 9, I'm not on quite as much, which is okay.
Yeah.
That's fine, because I'm on for about 7 or 8 minutes every half hour. The rest of the time I get to relax and do some other stuff. So we do all that. We're on till 9, and then I have 3.5 hours to work and do some stuff to get ready for our noon news. And then at 12:30, I am out the door.
Nice.
And unless there's a flood or a tornado warning, I am out the door. So then the one thing I've always used to try to legitimize it to myself, and this helps get me through, is my weekend starts at 12:30 on Friday.
Yeah, there you go.
That's okay.
That's right. Yeah, you've worked a full day already.
Exactly. So I have that. So I have Friday afternoon and Friday night versus Sunday night and Monday morning. That helps me get through it just a little bit.
I know, but how long have you been doing that type of schedule? Because that's extreme, Fred.
It is.
I mean,
extreme.
really.
I've been doing it for 17 years.
Man.
My daughter was just short of 2 when I started this shift. And just transitioned out of sports. I just was looking to do a little something different.
Well, that's a little different.
It's a lot different. It's a very different transition. Actually, I still got to do a lot of things in sports that really actually opened some doors for me, because I actually had some time that I was not working in sports for Channel 7 that I could do some other things and do a little play-by-play and do a bit part in a movie and that kind of thing. So a bit part in a movie that got cut out. But anyway.
He left that out. Well, he did say it, though.
That's right.
I made the trailer. That was it. But so I've been doing it for 17 years, and I've been going to bed before my daughter, who just graduated from Malden High School. I've been going to bed before her since, she was, Daddy's got to go to bed now. Good night, go to bed early. And since she was, about 2 years old or so.
So what time is bedtime then?
Bedtime for me, I really should go to bed earlier than this, and all the sleep studies will tell you this is terrible. I go to bed at 8. I should probably go to bed at like 6 or 7, but it's just not realistic. So a lot of times in the afternoon, I'll fall asleep in the chair for about 45 minutes after I get home. So
I couldn't.
yeah, I know.
There's no way I could do that.
I
type of
understand.
schedule.
I understand, and I didn't think I could either. The first time I was driving in, of course, I was a little bit younger. The first time I was driving in, it occurred to me, it's like there were days when I was younger that I used to be coming home.
That's
about
right.
this time. You know, much
some
less the
people
other way.
are just going to bed at
Exactly.
1:55.
Yeah, exactly. Or driving in at 3, all of a sudden it's kind of going like, wow, I'm going to work. So it's got its advantages, but there's not too many traditional TV shifts.
Yes.
Because if you're like Tom and Amy, for instance, their work schedule, I think, is roughly 3 in the afternoon till 11:30 or something like that. And
Right.
they get a dinner break, but if you got a long drive home, it's not that realistic. So, it's worked for me. With a daughter, I've actually got to spend a lot of time with her. So, as I know, it's brutal, but
It sounds brutal.
yeah, I know, and it was when I said, "Oh, I really want to do this." So,
And he
but it's worked
volunteered
out.
for it.
I know.
And I did.
as
I
well.
volunteered
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
But I know, for me, when I was here in the upstate and going to Furman, you were this local sports guy. And now you do a lot of stuff for Clemson. So you've got your hands still on a bunch of sports stuff today.
Yeah, it opened some doors. One of the first things I started doing was, you might remember several years ago there was CSS, and
Yes.
they used to do the Clemson replay, and a lot of times it would be, I think I can't recall now. It depended on who carried Saturday's game, but there were a lot of times that they weren't able to use that to cut it down. So we would actually produce the games, and I would do them live onto tape. Although there were a couple times you could have bought them back in the old pay-per-view days. So I did some Clemson football with them for about 5 years. I'd do about 4 or 5 games a year. The old charter high school football games, I did play-by-play on them for a number of years. John Burton was who
Yep.
I worked for.
Okay.
You know
Yep.
Channel 7 so well. And yeah, in the last few years, it's been fun to get to do some stuff at Clemson, some women's basketball, baseball, volleyball, and men's and women's soccer. So that's been fun too.
Yeah.
It's made for some. I've taken a few weeknight games, and when you're doing a weeknight game, nothing against the Tigers in any way, shape, or form. But if I'm working a Wednesday night baseball game and I got to work Thursday morning, whoever's leading in the 9th inning is my favorite team.
Yes.
So of course, in this right now. See, that's why I'm a big proponent of just go to 7 innings for
Yeah.
baseball. We don't need 9 innings, right?
Especially during the week.
Exactly.
You get those midweek pitchers, and you just never know what's going to happen. Although I did one game this year, I think that was their one of their 2 Furman games, and they played the game in like 2 hours and 20 minutes. It was incredible.
Yes.
I mean, there was these 5 and 6 pitch innings. I'm going like, I'm not saying a word because this is going great.
Yeah.
Now, have you ever had a situation where you weren't able to go to sleep? Based on just some type of other activities, family, something?
Well, the toughest thing for me is to come off an extended vacation and kind of get back into that. And it's really hard to sleep when you have to. You get into
Yeah, with the pressure on.
When the
Yep.
pressure's on, it's like, okay, go to sleep now. And then it's 9 o'clock. It's like, okay, if I fall asleep right now, you start doing the math.
You're watching the clock.
Yeah, you're doing. It's 10 o'clock, and I went to Indiana, and when they played Duke many years ago in the round of 16, and Indiana actually upset them, which was a huge win. And I was actually watching it, and a friend of mine called my wife. She said, "You better wake him up because he's going to want to see this." And I can hear her outside. She goes, "Well, let me just see, how asleep he is." It's like, "Oh, you stinker! You're watching him." I said, "Like, we're about to beat Duke. This is awesome." So,
That's awesome.
A little bit. So yeah, my big fear is the 21 inning game. Clemson had one of those, or
Yeah.
22 innings, whatever it was, and it's just I'll just drive straight to work. So
Yes.
that'll be an interesting one hopefully that doesn't ever come up. Hopefully not.
What do you make? So you've been here in the upstate, I guess, since the late 80s. What do you make of the recent rise of Clemson football?
It's astounding. It's really astounding. The last Clemson game I called for CSS was Dabo Sweeney's first win. It was at Boston College. He had his debut was Georgia Tech, and they lost. Georgia Tech was good, and they went up and won at Boston College, and got to meet him after the game because Pete was doing the coaches show at that point, and they would record stuff right after the game, and got to meet him and his wife. And I didn't look at the wide receivers coach and think this guy's going to knock it out of the park, much less take Clemson to where they'd never been. So it's absolutely astounding. I know a lot of people don't want to hear the little old Clemson anymore when you get a $93 million contract to coach football, and you see the salaries that they're making for the assistant coaching staff. But it's just incredible what he's done. And that's really kind of the way it is. I know that everybody, when a coaching job opens up, whether it be football, basketball, everyone's always looking for, we got to get a name, established winner, and all that stuff. But the names and established winners had to start someplace. So, I mean, I really celebrate that, they didn't have to go out and pay $1 zillion to try to bring somebody in to try to recreate it. They've got a guy who built it on his own, and I could never have seen this coming.
No, I don't think many people could. And I was even one of as a Clemson grad, talking about, what are we doing? Hiring Dabo Swinney. I mean, this is a big mistake, because I felt that they did make the right move when they went and got Tommy Bowden. He was the hot name, tied to Bobby Bowden, coming off the undefeated season at Tulane, and that was a nice move. Yeah. And then when the wheels came off there, it was like, all right, well, we've got to get somebody even a bigger name. And so I thought it was a mistake to get Dabo. But what you've been able to see him do, not just from the football wins and losses, obviously. I mean, that's insane. 2 out of the last 3 national championships is just something you can never even script it out, but just what he's done in terms of changing the culture. Yeah. And just not with the football program, I'm talking about the whole university. I mean, it's just completely different now. Yeah,
and I try not to just, buy into just saying like, yeah, I believe everything I see, but it's hard not to with him. And, I've been lucky enough in news to have gone to 2 of the national championship games. One they lost, the last one they won back in January. And, I know that there are moments that happen behind closed doors,
of course,
that are a good thing and that people might not want to see, but that is part of it. If you want to be good, I'm sure that he has his moments, but man, I really believe what you're talking about. I really just, if I'm falling for something, I'm guilty but I really do believe a lot in what he's doing.
I think so too. And I'm not saying that it's perfect. Don't get me wrong, because every organization, whether it's from a family all the way up to a multi-billion-dollar company, there's dysfunction. There's going to be some type of issues, and it's not going to always run the way it's perceived. But from what I'm seeing as well, it seems that it's legitimate and authentic. I think that's the biggest thing that I see is that authentic.
So now that Clemson's at 1, 2 of the last 3, I'm starting to see, I guess, a little wind of change in the media, I feel like, and Clemson's not little old Clemson anymore. And I feel like there's even some efforts being made to start painting Clemson as a little bit of a villain, or maybe you're coasting through an ACC schedule that isn't quite as easy, or you look at analytics and things like that. What do you guys make of where I feel like it's headed for Clemson now that they're on the top?
I think if it had been, there were 4 ways the national championship game could have gone. Alabama wins big. Clemson wins big. We all know Clemson wins big was the distant 4th that everybody thought going in. 44-17 makes you go, wow. Yeah. If they had, they beat him with a second to go the first time. If they'd beaten him by a touchdown this time, but 44-17 and left points, sitting on the field.
Yeah. Could have scored again at the end.
Could have scored at the end. They had a fumble late. It's just, I have sort of noticed that a little bit, although I know there's a lot of, I hate to use the word SEC media, but there is some of it out there that advertises their SEC media. And it's almost like you've seen them go through stages of grief in a way, because, they hit the 44-17's hard to like, wow. And then, Clemson has their intact coaching staff, which is something we can talk about, the remarkable consistency there. And Saban's got a complete coaching turnover once again, and people are going like, well, that doesn't look so shaky. But then all of a sudden it starts, a few months passes, and all of a sudden it's like, well, Alabama was worn out from that murderous SEC schedule. And I was thinking like, well, if Alabama had won the game, you would have said they were battle tested because they had gone through a tough SEC schedule. So,
no, it's comical how it can go. The story can be painted a different way based on the lens that somebody is looking through. And that's what typically happens, especially with Clemson right now. They get beat up about playing in the ACC, that they could never really compete for a national title if they were in the SEC because they would lose 2 or 3 games each year in the SEC. And then the question is, well, if Clemson would play somebody, like, who else it's Alabama.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be the greatest program in football history, and it is, right? When you look at it from a historical perspective. But so who else do you want Clemson to beat? That's the team that's on the mountaintop, and Clemson has beat them 2 out of the last 3 times for the national championship.
Yep. And you see, and conferences go through cycles. And I think, the SEC, to their credit, might be on at least a little bit of an upcycle right now when you look at where Georgia is compared to maybe where they were 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Tennessee has to get better. They can't get worse. Yes. I just think by accident, Pruitt makes them better. Florida looks like they've got a chance to kind of take off. Kentucky looks solid. I'm not saying contender. You look at Auburn, you look at LSU. I know that you can see a little bit coming up, but these things are such cycles. But, Clemson has 4 games that they schedule outside the league. Well, 2 of them are against SEC schools. Mm-hmm. We're playing Texas A&M. We're playing South Carolina, who's our rival. So what more you want to do? I'll tell you how much schedules have changed, by the way. I mentioned I went to Indiana, and Lee Corso was the coach there my freshman year. I'll just go ahead and say it was 1978. I know, grown again. And back then, first of all, I'd never heard of an open date until I moved to the South. And said, like, what do you mean you have an open date? It's like, oh, yeah, we have it's a rest off. It's an off week. Whereas in the Big Ten back then, you played straight through. But you played 8 games against the Big Ten. You had 3 non-conference games. And our 3 non-conference games they opened, like I was on the team. They opened at LSU at night. They came home and played Washington coming off winning the Rose Bowl. And then the next week they played Nebraska at home.
Goodness.
With Tom Osborne.
Now that's
then they played the Big Ten. Times have changed.
Yes,
unbelievable.
That's incredible. I don't know. That athletic director should have been fired.
What do you make of the Big Ten? Hasn't had success, really. I mean, so Ohio State won that title. Mm-hmm. Since then, I don't think the Big Ten has scored a point. You've only been in a couple of times and haven't scored a point. Is there that big of a difference between football that's going on in the South and what's happening in the Midwest, or is that just a quirk?
No, I think there is. It's such a different thing down here although I think the Big Ten has done a lot of things to try to narrow the gap. I think that the Big Ten recruits way more in the South than teams in the South recruit Big Ten area. You might grab a player here or there. Mm-hmm. Dabo's got a starting tackle. It looks like this year it came right out of under Ohio State's nose. I can't really figure out exactly what it is because you look at Ohio State and, I know that they get tons of athletes and, Urban Meyer up until this past season, now heading into the new season, it's always, he's one of the best. He's won this many and you acknowledge that and you respect that. But you lose by 29 at Purdue and you play Iowa the year before and get blown out of there by 3 or 4 touchdowns. I don't know what they don't quite have. Jim Harbaugh, huge success at Stanford. You would think that he would be perfect at Michigan and it would work. And so far, just for a while last year, it looked like it was. It didn't wind up at the finish looking like that. Yeah. The Big Ten's a mystery, but I just think Southern football it's so much bigger of a deal here. Second game I ever went to when I moved here was Clemson at Georgia.
Oh, wow.
And I remember
That's an experience.
Oh, my goodness. And I remember talking to my brother who went to Illinois. He said, so is it a real big deal? He said, it's like we play touch football compared to what happens down here. It's just a totally different thing.
Yeah, it is a mystery though with the Big Ten, because if you look at in terms of talent for each conference, and one way to measure that is players that get drafted in the NFL, to play in the NFL.
Yep.
And it's the SEC, and then second is Big Ten.
Yeah.
And then it's the ACC. And there's somewhat of a disparity between the SEC and the Big Ten, because Big Ten and ACC are relatively close in terms of the numbers. But still, you would think that there's got to be some other success outside of the Ohio State and Michigan, because it's so top heavy.
Yeah. The only thing I kind of
10.
see that might be a little bit of a difference is that it looks like, Alabama is the class of the SEC, obviously. Georgia, the class of the East, and right at Alabama's heels. But it just seems like in the Big Ten, you get Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, and you get those schools. I don't think there's that much separation between them. So I think that's why they hurt themselves in the playoffs. Even though we think Ohio State is at the level of the others that we talk about because of that's a great metric you talked about. I think that they're just a little bit tighter bunch. I think that's why they beat up on each other a little bit. Still doesn't explain losing to Purdue by 29.
No.
But
well, there could be a lot of internal
theory.
things that were going on at
That's
Ohio
true.
State, too.
Yeah.
I feel like from an eye test, and again, you're spouting facts, which I normally do, so I'm going to go just completely eye test now. I feel like when I watch Big Ten football, it moves at a significantly slower pace. I mean, if you talk about the game today, really how much of it is speed.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you look at the Ohio States and Michigans, and I know they have great athletes, and again, bombard me, I'm sure I have a lot of this wrong, but I feel like they have one or two really fast guys. And then they come and play Alabama or Clemson or LSU who have 12 or 14 guys that are like that. I feel like it's a speed thing when I watch. But you guys are both looking at me like I'm crazy.
Because I felt
This is
that
my
way.
tired look.
Yeah.
He's
been up since 1:55.
That's my power nap that I was taking while you were talking.
That's right. Well, you can even look at just even in the ACC. I remember there was a disparity between speed with Clemson and Florida State.
Yes.
I mean, it was
same type thing.
drastic.
Yes.
And so I think it just parlays right into what you're describing with the Big Ten and the SEC and certain teams in the ACC. There's definitely a speed difference.
I think so too. Yeah, and it's in positions besides just skills spots. It's linebackers who can just, cover so much ground, and you see some of these guys on Clemson and some of these. It's amazing when you interview those players after a game, and gosh, they're so big. But you just see the enormous arms. They're fast enough, but their arm still gets there. 2 seconds before their body does. It seems like they're so large.
Yeah. What do you think? So as you've been in the upstate here and you've gone through all this, college football has changed a lot. Do you like the playoff system the way it is today with the 4 teams? Should it be 8? Do you wish they didn't have it? What are your thoughts on that?
I am not a great fan of the old system. First of all, I'll go back to the way old system where we just voted this stuff. It never made sense to me. I can remember one year early on, Southern Cal was number 1, Oklahoma was number 2. They played in Los Angeles. Oklahoma leads the entire game. Southern Cal scores with like 30 seconds to go to win the game. The next week, Oklahoma was 8th. I'm like, how can
how can they drop that far?
How can they be 8th? And that's the way that system was. So I didn't like that. I didn't like the BCS just trying to pick 2. Although in the last few years, the BCS probably would have worked great. At least if you were going to pick 2, you could probably pick Alabama, Clemson a lot of times. I'm perfectly happy with 4. I know 4. There's 5 power conferences. So a power conference gets left out. And if you put a Notre Dame in there, that means 2 power leagues get left out. If you go to 8, I'm not going to be upset. I'm still going to watch. But then how far do you go? Then does it become 1AA and it's 16?
Yes.
So I think 4 works. I know it's supposedly takes away from the bowl system, but I think that's inevitable. That's been already happening. So
I agree that this whole talk about that it's eroding the bowl system and that the fans are going to watch bowl games, even when it was just voting or the BCS, did anybody really care about the other bowl games unless it was your school?
Right.
Not much.
Not much.
Well, it's good because there's football on every day for like 3 weeks over the holidays.
Yeah, I mean, and
it's on and you watch, but you're not like.
But the
looking
main
forward to it
game
most
was
of the time.
whoever's going to be playing for the national championship, and that's why I don't think that there's this. From a national perspective, fans are outraged that there's this erosion of the bowl games because they didn't care about them anyway.
Yeah.
They really didn't. Unless your team was playing in it, that was the only reason that you would be excited about a bowl game. And now I get it that you might not have as much excitement because there's a playoff system, and playoff, at least it evokes hope. If you can get in the playoff, it's like March Madness.
Right.
Hey, we got a shot. You never know what can happen. Cinderella story, right?
Yeah.
And so I get that, but still, unless you're playing for the title, I don't know how much people really cared about the bowl games.
I do ask that, and I ask this every year. I go on social media to ask it. I say, like, look, we need to have, going into the bowl season, a designated day, though, where all teams declare whether they care or not. Because that's always the excuse, you know?
That's right. They don't want to play in that bowl game. That's
I
right.
mean, Central Florida beat Auburn. Well, Auburn didn't care about that game. Well, they should have declared before the game. Do you care or not? If you don't care, we respect you.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you win, it's a bonus. It's like, we beat those guys and we didn't even care.
We got to get that trending. I love this idea.
Great. Yeah, I think. Announce the bowls, and then maybe the next night.
December 1, you've got to declare.
Exactly. All right, and it can be up to the coach. It can be a team vote. However they want to do it, we have to declare.
You got to have a press conference where you actually put it out there in person.
Exactly. Going like, Coach, why don't you care about the game? Well,
seems like it's the SEC teams a lot of times too that didn't. I mean, it was Georgia last year, right? That said we should have been in the playoffs, and now that we're not in the playoffs, we could care less. Then they go and get beat.
They lose their game, and they say like, "Well, our team didn't care because we." Then why'd you play?
Yeah.
Why go? If you're not, if that's going to be, I can remember going back hearing that about who was some of those Kansas State teams when they kind of first had their breakthrough and then would, commit 4,000 penalties and lose a game to somebody. And then they lost their bowl game, I think, to Purdue. And it's like, well, they didn't care. Okay. As long as we got that established.
So so if you're a Clemson fan right now, you want it to stay the same because Clemson right now appears like they're going to make it in every year. So you don't want more teams if you're a Clemson fan or an Alabama fan. But I like the idea of 8 or 16 in some ways. You've been covering Furman and Wofford up here for a really long time in the 1AA playoffs. I went to Furman, so I have always followed them as well. That would become the biggest, less the Super Bowl. That would become as big as March Madness if you had 16 teams playing in college football playoffs. I feel like. Am I wrong?
I don't know if it would be as much as March Madness because March Madness has the nature of the game is so different. Is in that. A nothing team can just show up and shoot 80% more than a nothing team can show up and beat Alabama or something like that. I'm thinking a couple of those near misses that came up on Duke this last tournament as an example of that. I don't know if it would make a difference or not. But to your point, I mean, they can play it because Furman and Wofford trying to win national championships. Furman won it. They play week after week after week, and they've only got 65 scholarships.
Yes.
And still are playing like a high school schedule. That Clemson went 15-0, but I mean the 1AA champion, or I'm sorry, FBS, whatever it is. It's
FCS.
FCS. Right, there you go. Haven't they been playing? Doesn't their champion play 15 games? Haven't they been playing that for a long time?
Yeah.
So, I'm not a fan of it, but I'm sure it's inevitable because somebody's going to hold up a big sack of money.
That's the bottom line. It might not ever get to 16, just from a logistics. I think people will really question that. But from an 18 perspective, I definitely see that's coming because somebody's going to write a big check for the TV rights, streaming rights, whatever it is. Somebody's going to write that check, and that's when we're going to get it.
And I think the other reason why it will probably go to 8 is that, the Big Ten hasn't had a chance to score a point. They haven't scored. In their last 2 playoff games, they haven't made the playoffs the last 2 years. Haven't had a chance to get in there.
Yeah, and I think if you're any fan, Clemson fan, I think you want it to go to 8. Because that gives you actually some ability. You can still lose a game and get in. Right now, I don't know if Clemson loses a game. I don't know if they could get in because of the talk track. Oh, it's the ACC schedule.
That's interesting.
Right.
See, I think that Clemson doing as well as they have the last 4 years, I would say the opposite. I would
You
say
think
that
they get benefit of the doubt?
Clemson could dump any game this year as long as they win the ACC. If they're 12-1 and ACC champs, they're in. Just like Alabama got the benefit of the doubt, I felt like 2 years ago.
And that's the frustrating thing for a lot of the fans because we hear the talk track from the committee, right? Is that we only look at it in this vacuum for this year. We don't take into consideration history, right? But we know that's false because it's human nature.
Sure it
It's
is.
humans that are voting still on this for these teams, this committee. And that's the reality of it is that they're going to take some historical significance into the equation. And that's why I just think that it does allow you to have a better opportunity because now if you lose 2 games, maybe you still get a chance if there's 8 teams based on how other teams fall out.
It does give you more margin for error, but I mean, Clemson has made it losing to Syracuse. They've made it losing to Pitt. They even lost to Pitt relatively late.
Yeah.
It just really depends a lot on what's going on around you.
Well, and that's what happened. Yeah. Michigan ended up losing that same weekend. There were like 2 other teams that lost when Clemson ended up getting beat by Pitt. And so it worked out in their favor. They just happened to lose on the right weekend. You know, that they didn't lose in another
I think they're
weekend.
getting enough respect that because of what they've done, beating Alabama 2 out of 3 times, I think has proven to be awfully worthwhile to them. Well, 2 of the last 3 of the national championships game. I know 2-2 in the big picture. Looking at 4 games, but I think they have earned a little bit. I think they've built up a pretty good little bank account now. Again, I don't know how many times I've said 44-17 since we've been talking here, but 44-17 gives you a little bit of a bankroll.
The biggest way to make change happen sooner rather than later is the Notre Dame factor. I feel like the Pac-12 or the Big Ten has been getting left out on the regular. They both get left out last season. If that were to happen again this season, let's say 2 SEC teams get in or Notre Dame gets in again, I feel like at some point a couple of those conferences rise up with their giant checkbooks and say, why are we doing this, right?
Yeah.
You need to make it where all of us can get in every year or give us more chance to be able to get in. I think the Notre Dame factor, and again, you had the year where 2 SEC teams got in. If that happens again for a 3rd straight year, I'm surprised we actually haven't heard pushback already from the Big Ten, from the Pac-12, or and doing what they're doing right now. But I think that could be a big problem if it were to happen again this year.
Well, the one advantage of going to 8 would be it's easier to say you're 8 and this team is 9 rather than saying you're 4 and you're 5 and you're 6.
Yeah, there's definitely a bigger drop off between 8 and then 9 than 4
I mean,
and 5.
I'm sure the number 9 team could get red hot and win 3 games. I know it's conceivable, but the chances are smaller. So I think they're going to go to 8, but again, I'm fine with 4.
What's your take on, you've been covering the Gamecocks for a long time as well, and their program's in a little bit different place than Clemson. What's your take on where you feel like the Gamecocks might be headed in the next couple of years?
Well,
this year's going to be a bear. They got the
this year's
toughest
gonna be a
schedule in the
bear.
country.
I know.
Hard schedule.
It's brutal. It's just brutal how they've got to just, you look at what they've got. I mean, a rivalry game's hard enough. Now the rivalry game is one of the 2 best programs in college football. And I know we've talked a lot about the SEC, but they got to play Bama and, I mean...
Georgia?
Georgia.
My goodness.
And on the road, it was at Tennessee. They've got to play Florida as well. I mean, so they've...
I think that... I don't know if Muschamp is the guy. I don't know. I think at this point, I think he's done a lot of good things. I think you've got to give him, obviously, benefit because, for one thing, he just finally got... What's so important now is getting a football building. So, it's not a plot of land over there anymore, and it's not a bunch of girders that'll be great next year when you're graduated or you turn pro or something like that. Now he's got something to work with, and I don't pay too much attention to all the recruiting stuff, but it looks like it's paid off already. It looks like they've got some good players. They're competing for players, and that's kind of what Clemson did. Clemson got in the competition for guys. They were losing, but they were in the competition. Then they started snagging a few, and then the results take off. So I don't know if he's there or not because they're such an odd program. I know they were really beat up at the end of last year, but I would think that coming off the Clemson game, where I never thought they had a chance to win it. I just didn't think they could ever stop Clemson. But they put, 30-plus points and 5,500 yards passing and all that. You think, okay, they're going to roll in their bowl game. They're playing Virginia. It's just up the street. I mean, they should be really ready to go. And they absolutely stink it up. That's what makes me wonder a little bit. I know that a lot of players sat out. I know it's a bowl game. We never got the official designation
That's
whether
right.
they cared or not.
They didn't declare, right?
That. So I still have some doubts out there. I like Muschamp in that is people have really thought he was going to be something. He was supposed to be the coach in waiting at Texas, so they thought of him well there. Florida came and got him before that. They must have thought something of him. And I think that probably having been through a first job like Florida, which is tough, it's like, welcome. All you have to do is win the SEC East every year starting this year. I remember Clyde Wren, who used to be at Clemson for years, said, when you become a head coach, it takes you a year just to figure out remotely how to do the job. So I think maybe benefiting off of that'll help. I can see him making some progress, but he's got a really tough thing to deal with right now. And, as great as Steve Spurrier was and as great a job as he did at South Carolina, also remember Tennessee was way down. Florida was fading during his time and got, stuck there for a while. He was there at the tail end of Urban Meyer's best years. Georgia was in the Mark Richt territory, which was good one year, pretty good the other 2 or 3 years. I mean, he said he dealt with a very different set of circumstances than Muschamp's been dealing with. So that's why you got to have as much patience as anybody can have in college football these days.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think South Carolina's team could be better this year and end up with a worse record.
Yeah.
There's a very good chance.
Yeah, that's
as
very
tough as their
possible.
schedule is.
It's very
It'll be
possible.
interesting. All right, so you're from Indiana. And you're a big Indiana basketball fan. What's your take on the lay of the land in college basketball right now with all the scandals that have been going on? I feel like this one and done is getting a ton of – you're not seeing championship teams with one and dones except that one Duke team, I think, that got there. It just seems like college basketball is in a really weird place right now. What is your take on it?
Sometimes I feel like I need to take a shower after watching a college basketball game because I don't want to know what all went through to get those players on the floor. I know that – everybody blames the one and done for kind of where we are right now. And every indication is that's going to be going away in 2 or 3 years. I do want to caution fans about one thing. Remember that once that happens, you might sign some stud in November and you're going we're going to be great next year. And then you'll get around to April and suddenly he's got an agent because he's going to go pro. And unlike football, it's kind of hard to go back out and replace them right away. Although that leads to something else, which is this new grad transfer era we're in. It's almost like waiver wire. There's almost 3 points of the year, 2 points of the year. You sign players in November, and then maybe you pick up somebody late, maybe in the spring, and then suddenly the grad transfer things come out, and now you're completely rebuilding your roster. It's a new kind of one and done on the backside. At least those guys have a degree, though.
Yeah.
But I miss it the way this is going to be, old man, get off my lawn, that kind of thing. I understand it, but, Michael Jordan played 3 years at North Carolina. Ralph played all 4 years, if I remember correctly, at Virginia. There was just something about seeing those players every single year. And then even it whittled back to maybe 2 or 3 years. But still, that was just special because here he comes again. We're going to get on him this year.
Yeah.
We don't do that because although he rattled a bunch of rims, Zion Williams is gone from Duke. He's gone. He's history, and now it's just the next group that comes in. It doesn't have quite the same appeal for me, but I still love March.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know.
I was going to ask you. He likes the transfer portal and the moving around aspect of it from a player protection.
I do, but I am also from a fan perspective. Yeah, I do miss the 80s college basketball, and that's where you had those teams, and you knew who the team members were for a good 3 or 4 years. I mean, you became loyal to the team and the players around that. Now, it's hard to become loyal to the players that are on the team because they're might only be there for a year or two, especially the star players, right? But from my perspective, I don't have a problem with the transfer situation because it's not the same for every sport. And it's men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, hockey, and football are the only sports that they require that you have to sit out if you transfer. All the other sports, hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
But why is it just those sports? Well, we know the reason why. At the end of the day, because it's dollars.
Sure.
Those are the big revenue sports. Now, you can argue hockey and baseball and women's basketball, but we know men's basketball and football, that's it. So that's where I get frustrated with the hypocrisy of the NCAA and in trying to enforce some rule like that. And the one and done, that's an NBA rule.
Yep.
That's true. I know.
That's not.
Thank you for saying that because so many people say like the NCAA, like no,
that's not.
Now they're complicit with it.
Oh yes, they are.
You know, they're like.
Oh, they love it.
They love it, and they don't. You know, a lot of people they don't penalize a team. You know, you go through the APR and all that stuff. Well, if a player comes to you for 1 year and goes to the pros, as far as your scores go, he never existed. If you get a guy for 2 years, he's on his way to his degree and says, I'm not getting any playing time here, he transfers, you didn't educate him and it
does hurt you.
Which is, that's to me, is crazy.
Yeah.
I've never understood how that works, but I don't understand. You brought up the transfer thing, and maybe you guys know the answer to this because I have Googled myself to death trying to figure this out. Okay. Hunter Johnson leaves Clemson, goes to Northwestern, sits out a year. Jacob Eason goes to Washington, leaving Georgia, has to sit out a year. Now, I understand Fields leaves Georgia. There were extenuating circumstances. He goes to Ohio State. At least he's planning to go to Ohio State.
Yeah.
But there's this kid at Ohio State, Tate Martell, who goes on social media and says, don't come here, the job's not open. Well, Fields goes to Ohio State, where this kid played, I think, in 8 games last year. I looked it up. He threw 28 passes. He ran the ball 22 times. He goes to Miami. He's immediately eligible. And he only left for playing time. And how does that work? I don't understand. You know,
And then you see other ones get denied.
And get
I want to move
denied.
closer to my home because my grandfather is
That's
ill and I
the
want to spend some
NCAA.
time with him. You can sit a year.
yeah. I mean, when Martell did this, I thought free agency's here.
I agree with you.
It's here. And we haven't seen him show up yet. By the way, where is Tavian Feaster going? Because
He is not announced
Nobody,
yet.
yeah.
I've
Nobody
heard
knows it.
he's interested in the Gamecocks. He's
Right.
interested in Virginia Tech. I think there's some other schools that have been kicked around, but he still has not made his
we're
decision.
like 72 days away from kickoff. And I think he's supposed to graduate in August. Can he go before then? Or does he have to go with like 2 weeks
That's a good
to
question.
get ready? I don't
I don't know the answer to that.
That might be
either.
the reason why he's sitting on the decision a little bit, is because he still has to finish his classes to get there. I hadn't thought about that.
It's become my new favorite sports tweet is for people to say, Mark Childress has entered the transfer portal.
Yes.
Whatever it is, exactly. And I just imagine the scene on the Millennium Falcon when it goes to light speed. It's like, oh, he's gone.
That's right. He is
He's dead.
gone.
But right now, Tavian is still stuck in the portal. So,
But you know, you had the one kid, Brew McCoy, who was at Southern Cal. He transferred to Texas and went through spring practice and is now transferring back to Southern Cal. So I feel like we're already seeing, I don't want to see people trying to break it, but there's so many aspects of this that I feel like, and I know we disagree on this, but I feel like that the NCAA did not think through very well, and we're starting to see some of that exposed right now. So I would just like some guardrails. I like the idea of the transfer portal, but you need to have some kind of guardrails around it with some level of rules so that people aren't just constantly bouncing back.
Now, we don't disagree on the NCAA's ineptness in this.
Yes.
Now,
Okay,
we
good. Yeah, we're in full
agree-
agreement on that. Yes.
We're in full agreement on that. Where I get frustrated also is that when the players are getting attacked in terms of how can you transfer? Why is he getting the ability to play immediately? And why would they, hire a lawyer to be able to look at, extenuating circumstances? Don't be mad at the player because they're actually following the rules
Yeah.
set by the NCAA.
Yeah.
And if the NCAA allows you the ability to present your case, then don't be mad at them, because how many people would do the exact same thing if they had the opportunity? And if that was within their rule limits that they could do that, they would do the same thing. So don't be mad at them. Be mad at the NCAA.
Yeah.
Because, yes, they have not thought through this at all. That's why you have all of these situations where one's approved, one's not, and guys going back and forth.
Wasn't the rule born for the grad transfer thing
Yes.
with a good idea that I've graduated, I have a year of eligibility left, I want to go to grad school, this school doesn't offer it to me. It seems like a good idea. Okay, you can go to this school, play a year, go to grad school. And I think Russell Wilson, was he the one that kind of changed this because he went to NC State and he goes to Wisconsin and takes them maybe to the Rose Bowl, or at least they had a great season. And all of a sudden everyone goes, oh, this can be a really, really good rule.
Yep.
So it kind of starts that way. But at the same time, and the player's name escapes me, he was at Clemson. He was a defensive tackle. He had graduated, and it looked like he was going to be a great chance to start on last year's team. And then Wilkins surprises everybody and stays. And all of a sudden he's like, I'm a senior. And he transferred and I believe started and played at West Virginia. I think that's a good thing under those circumstances. And I
Yes.
think Feaster, I was kidding more or less about Feaster.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything against him. I understand where he's coming from.
Yep.
Because, he wants to play. He wants to have his opportunity a little bit more than it looks like he's at best is going to share the load
Yes.
here. So, I can understand that. But, yeah, the fans, of course, fans get on the high school kids when they change their minds.
Of course.
Just before even the old verbal commitment. And is this a hard commitment or a soft commitment? When recruiting invented terms like that, I just said, like, okay.
Yeah.
We've entered a new realm here. So fascinating stuff.
Would it bother you if I'm getting my head around, by the way, I'm embracing the transfer stuff a lot more than I have over the last couple of months. Tavian Feaster, I wish him the best wherever he goes. As a Clemson fan, it bothers me a little bit if you go to the rival school. I'm not, on the internet yelling about it. Oh, we'll turn our back on you if you're a Gamecock and things like that. I just don't like the idea that it's going to have to be a big story, right? So does it bother you guys if you're going to go down the road and play for the arch rival?
Doesn't bother me
Okay.
at all.
All right.
Yeah. How many times we see people in just the general public, they might go work for a competitor.
Yeah.
Now, I know you can't. I
Publix,
get
now I'm
it.
at Bilo.
Yeah, and I get it. There's not the same type of comparison between sports and regular jobs in different industries or whatever. But when you break it down, yeah, you do need to view it that way because it is the same. And it's the point where fans become fanatics and cross that line that, oh my goodness, because they went to the rival school that this person now is, off their list. It's a bad person, whatever. I just think that is just so, I don't know what the right word is for it.
I just think it's adding a layer. It's something that we'll have to discuss, right? Instead of it
we
being
don't need
Clemson,
to.
South Carolina this year, if you're transferring, I feel like it's something you should at least consider because all eyes, if you were to go to South Carolina and play, all eyes will be on Tavian Feaster that week. And if he breaks a big play, Clemson fans going to be like, I can't believe he left. And if he doesn't do anything, he's like, it serves you right for, going down there. And it becomes this big story that people like Fred at 4:15,
exactly.
4:37 in the morning, Fred will have a nice little package
writing up
on.
the script.
5:07, 5:37. Yeah, we'll just keep running.
That's the
it
part
over
that
and
bothers
over
me
again.
about it is, it's got to be hard enough to transfer. Just think about what a kid's got to do. You're at a school and you've got to go somewhere else and all the complications that go with that. Now I just feel like you're putting a bullseye on your back if you go to a rival.
Well, I
You
agree
are.
with what you're saying, but I also think, now he is an older player now.
Yep, it's true.
And he's born in this state. He was raised in this state. I think if he does go there, I think he has to know what he's getting into. So I think that would be part of it. And if he's okay with knowing that there's going to be a lot of attention, I'm not trying to legitimize the fan stuff that we're talking about. First of all, if you go on Twitter or Instagram and go to a college athlete's page to say something to them, I really want to double check your age. Unless they've suffered a catastrophic injury and you want to wish them best in the recovery or something like that. Just like, think how old you are before you respond to this young man, especially these recruits. Come to our school, please.
Yeah. I've always believed in don't press send.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
No, Tony Dungy, or not Tony Dungy, but Herm Edwards. Yeah. Would always say, don't press send.
Type it all, but never press send. I love that.
I've been looking at a bunch of the numbers around Trevor Lawrence, and statistically, he had the best season ever for a true freshman quarterback, right? We're not counting some of the redshirt freshmen. And if you bounce him up against, quarterbacks that are in the pros today and the type of seasons they've had, a historic one where he didn't play in 4 of the games.
Yeah.
And there were a number of other games where he came out a lot earlier than normal. Is Trevor Lawrence the best quarterback that you've seen on the college level? And it's hard to say that after a true freshman year.
Yeah.
It's only 1 year.
Yeah, it's only been 1 year. I've only seen him play in person once. It was against Alabama.
Yeah.
And we sat in the high up in one of the end zones, which actually was kind of nice in some ways because you could see much better than flat just some of the throws he's making. Some of the outs are just, it's incredible what he does. And if he's also blessed in that if he misses by a little bit, he's got some receivers.
Yes, he does.
Man, they can do some stuff. I'm not ready to say best ever. I mean, or anything like that, but phenomenal. Has a chance to be as good as we've seen. But at this point, I don't want to go all the way there just yet. But, man, he's one of those very, very rare guys who wound up being as good as advertised.
I think
that doesn't happen very often.
That nails it right there, is that he came as delivered or as advertised, and that's what I think surprised a lot of people. It is hard to say he's the best ever after 1 year. Just the sample size is so small because, I mean, there's still an opportunity where he has a sophomore slump or the key injury happens. Are you still going to say he's the best ever just after 1 or 2 years of playing? That's very difficult. And especially when you look at what you were talking about, Fred, it's one of his positive traits that he does have is that he's got this unbelievable confidence that he will throw the 50-50 ball. He will throw it because he has the confidence not only in his skill set, because he can put it wherever he wants to, but sometimes it's going to be intercepted, or sometimes it's going to be the wide receiver that takes it. And I think that for Clemson, when he throws a 50-50 ball, it might be more 70-30 because of the receivers that Clemson has. And that's an advantage that not a lot of other quarterbacks have had in their history of playing, is having those type of receivers.
Did he throw a ridiculously low number of picks last year?
Yes.
Like 6 or 7?
It might have even been less than that. Yes.
I mean,
his touchdown to interception ratio
off the charts.
was historic.
Off the charts.
For a true freshman.
If he throws 10 this year, don't have people start going like, well, he's just not because
That's right.
I mean,
sophomore slump.
There we go. He's backpedaling, or something like that. I don't want to hear that stuff. So that's the only thing because sometimes it's hard to put those numbers. I mean, on paper, it looks like it should. I mean, he's got these stud receivers back. He's got these new ones coming in. I don't know how they're going to spread the ball around.
What a problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. But
and it's a different situation now. Not that he didn't have a target on his back already, because he did, just with the hype coming in, and then obviously the hair, and then everything happened with the transfer of Kelly Bryant. But now that you're coming off of winning a national championship, even more so the spotlight is going to be on him, because there's no longer the talk about the defense, right? Those guys are gone. It's all now talking about Trevor Lawrence and the offense. Can he lead the Tigers to a repeat performance?
And I've got to break some news for Clemson fans here. They will have some 3-and-outs this year. They will actually punt the ball a couple of times, and against a team that's really not that great, okay? They will play the Georgia Tech game I bet they punt once, and be okay with it.
People will panic.
Be okay. I think they'll probably punt once with Trevor in the game. Be okay. And you run this tape back on the 30th, and I'm wrong. Exactly. You said they weren't going to.
And he will throw an interception.
Well, then who is the best? I mean, so when I say best QB,
are you saying just Clemson, or are you saying
just in general? Like who is the person that after Trevor's been here 3 years and what Deshaun did here? Who's the person that you compare them to? What's the first guy that pops into your head?
Numbers are going to be.
I'm asking you who you think the best now is. Like if I say best ever college QB, who's the first guy that pops up into your head? And then how would you make the comparisons to him? Is it how many titles do you win? Do you have to win a Heisman Trophy? Is it the obscene 5,000-yard passing season numbers that have gone on? Who's the first guy that popped into your head when I say best ever college QB?
I'll reveal my age here, but the first guy that popped in my head was John Elway.
That's okay.
That's only 40 years ago. I thought of Dan Marino for a second, but Marino had some really shaky interception games that I can recall. Watson, really, really good. Remember when they said Watson was a one-man team? Yeah. Oh, he's gone. Clemson's done. Not quite so much. Ooh,
it's tough. Tim Tebow's the one that jumps out to me for college QB. Incredible leader. He got the 2 national titles. He got the Heisman Trophy. That's the guy in my mind. And again, you could probably name 20 who had better numbers and things like that. I think there's when I'm making my best ever decision, there's a big leadership component that goes with that. And that's why I would have Deshaun stacked as high as he would be on my list. Because of leadership is an intangible part of it.
It is.
And I think that Trevor has that in spades already. So he's going to have the ability, if he can win another title, or if he were to win 3 titles. Have we had a college QB that's ever won 3 national titles? I'm not sure we have.
No.
I think we've had only a handful that have even won 2. So even if he were to get 1 out of his last 2 years, he would go way up on my list when I'm making the comparisons.
As I'm trying to I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you and also thinking, and it's kind of funny, the first place I go is I think of the great pros and try to take them back to college. Tom Brady was at Michigan.
Yes.
Very forgettable career.
Right.
Peyton Manning was good enough to win the Heisman Trophy, except for the fact he had to play. He had to play Florida every year, which wound up going after. Brett Favre was at Southern Miss. It's really kind of interesting. I mean, one is not the same as the other. So I try not to get blinded by numbers because they can just, it depends on how you want to play the game and how long you want to leave guys in there.
But Elway didn't win a title.
No.
Didn't win a Heisman. But when you looked at him, you say best ever college QB.
He's just the first guy that popped in my head. Yep. But because of where I am right now and how many miles I am from the Clemson campus, I'll go with Deshaun Watson.
It's easy to say.
Job.
Yeah, that's right.
Who's the first guy that popped into your head when I said best ever?
It's interesting because this guy is definitely not the greatest college quarterback in history, but I think we also get influenced or biased by the periods of time in our life and that we view. So obviously, John Elway. I mean, that's and for me. It was being a student at Clemson, and it was then shortly after that, it was the Chris Winkie era at Florida State. We just could not do anything against Winkie.
I would have guessed 50 people.
Right? I
would
know.
have said Chris Winkie.
Yeah. Well, of course. And that's what I'm saying. I know he's not the best college quarterback in history, but for me, during that time, he just could not be stopped. I mean, he could not be stopped. And that was, now, again, you could look back at that Florida State team, even like Charlie Ward. I mean, that was an unbelievable quarterback. They just had a stack of talent at the time. And I think for whatever reason, I'm being biased by my nightmare memories of Florida State.
So Trevor Lawrence is no Chris Winkie. That's my takeaway.
Yes, exactly.
From today.
I seem to remember Chris Winkie playing a game at Clemson, and I think Clemson had him back on their own 5-yard line. I think he threw a touchdown pass. It was like a 95-yard touchdown.
I think it might have even been 98.
I'll actually correct you.
It was a play action.
You are correct about the play, but it was a play action. It was in Tallahassee, and this is why these memories are burnt in my brain, because
flashback.
I was in the end zone.
Okay.
In Tallahassee, a group of fraternity brothers were there and friends, and we see the play developing, and the running back, we manhandle, tackle him. We're jumping up, yelling, "Safety, safety," going crazy. And it's Winky. He's got the ball behind his back. He's standing there and then decides to drop back and throws a 99-yard pass to Snoop Menace. And
Menace.
That's right. And there's nobody around him. And he catches it like at the 50-yard line and it just waltzes right in.
Yeah. I may be thinking of a game then. I remember that play now, and I think that was the game that Florida State beat Clemson easily, but Clemson rushed. Like, it was a Tommy West team. I think rushed for like 300 yards on him, and that was considered to be like this monstrous
moral victory.
Yeah, it was. I still think the best, and I'm getting way away from your topic.
No, that's
now,
all right.
You're talking about Florida State. I've never seen anybody. The two best individual games I've ever seen against Clemson and almost against anybody was Calvin Johnson for Georgia Tech in a night game at Clemson.
I remember that one as well.
And then Warwick, I think it's 97. And he had one or two punt returns or one or two. I think he scored 3 touchdowns. One was on a punt return or two, and the other 2 were touchdown passes. And like nobody's around him. He wasn't quite as good a pro as he was in college,
right.
But man, in college, he was incredible.
Another one of those Florida State players.
Yeah.
I was going to try to end the show on a good note. We're talking about all these horrible things that happened to Clemson.
Well, we can
back
say
in the
Deshaun
day.
Watson then.
There we go. Deshaun Watson,
That's positive.
greatest quarterback
Trevor
in
Lawrence
college
is
football
no Chris
history.
Winky. I'm making a shirt for you and bringing it in. Fred, man, I hope you had fun. It
I
was
did.
a treat
This was
to
a
have
blast.
you here.
Thanks. I'm glad. Thank you for scheduling one that's a lot better with my sleep time.
Yeah, it's
Of
about
course,
your
man.
bedtime.
It's getting close. It's getting close in a couple of hours. That's for sure.
No doubt, man. Thanks for being here, Richmond, as always. Thanks for being here. And, hey, special shout-out to our friends at S.H. Carter. Thank you guys, as always, for being a presenting sponsor of our show. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next Monday night. Thanks a lot. Have yourself a great week. See ya.